All right, I have 1:32 Eastern time on my clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully a couple more people will be able to join us soon. This is the North Central IPM Center Pest in Progress webinar series. And today our webinar is entitled Adapting the Wisconsin IPM Program to the New Normal and Outreach Delivery, Successes, Challenges, and a Balanced Way Forward. And our speaker will be Jed Cahoon. And I am Lene Jess. I'm the co-director of the North Central IPM Center, and we're one of 4 regional IPM centers that are funded by the USDA NIFA Crop Protection and Pest Management Program, and we are the regional coordination part of that program. We have a mission to coordinate IPM across regions. We would like, if you have questions today, to go ahead and put them in the Q&A that's at the bottom of your Zoom control panel, and then at the end, I will present those questions to Jed for him to answer. If you would, I will also be putting some links in the chat that Jed has provided, so you'll see those pop up as we go along. We have Jed as our speaker today, so I'd like to welcome Jed Cahoon. He is a professor and the IPM program director at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thank you, Jed, for joining us, and take it away.
Thanks very much for the introduction, and thanks to those of you that are joining us online today in what is a very unusually balmy spring-like day, at least here in Wisconsin. And I imagine if you're towards the west, that has already changed back towards the winter conditions and this wild weather. But again, thanks very much for joining us. I imagine that much of what I'm going to share with you today is similar to what you've experienced in your states and IPM programs over the past couple of years. And outside of the simple satisfaction of commiseration, maybe I do have a couple of specific goals in mind for this presentation. Number one is to see if we might find some common ground in our new hybrid outreach programming that we could build on and learn from each other in terms of successes and challenges that we found along the way. And that leads to my second goal, is to identify ways that we can be more efficient with our time in a hybrid programming approach and optimize our delivery to a diverse clientele audience when it comes to technology adoption and their preference for learning in person versus hybrid or virtually. So let's jump in to talk about that. And I need to start with a bit of transition in many ways, not just in moving towards hybrid programming, but right here in the Wisconsin IPM program. I'll then give you a little bit of context on agriculture itself as it relates to IPM outreach programming in Wisconsin, some examples of some of our programming, and then what we've learned on that road. But let's start a little bit in that time of transition, and most importantly, recognizing and thanking Brian Jensen, who's made these presentations to you in the past, for his decades of service to Wisconsin agriculture, and more specifically to this IPM program. We thank Brian very much for his many years of dedicated effort in that way. In that transition, I've served as the IPM PI on the grant for several years, and now will take on that coordinator role. And I do so in the PI status piece with Damon Smith, who many of you know is a plant pathologist for field crops here in Wisconsin, now as a co-PI. And we also, in that transition to some more distance type work, have some new people involved with our IPM program here in Wisconsin. First, PJ Leash, who's working in insect diagnostics, so that expands our ability to be able to cover some of the distance diagnostics as it relates to the entomological range that Brian had been covering. And Dina Knudsen and Mimi Bresky, who are outreach specialists in our nutrient and pest management program, and now the IPM program. And they're helping us with some of our new digital and online delivery mechanisms. Continuing in the IPM program, myself, my specialty by training is weed management and specialty crops, fruit and vegetables here in Wisconsin. Dan Heider, outreach specialist who covers a lot of ground for our program, and the IR4 program coordinator, as well as Roger Schmidt, who works in IT and digital delivery and plays a very important role in this new hybrid delivery mechanism for the Wisconsin IPM program. Little context quickly here on Wisconsin agriculture, because you probably know this if you're in the north central region. Of course, we are known as America's dairy land, and we support that dairy industry with corn for silage. We're first in the US in production of corn for silage, and second, of course, in forage crops. And obviously we grow many other agronomic crops, third in oats, for example. But as a specialty crop person, I feel like I need to tell you a little bit about our specialty crops also, as they're very prominent in our agricultural industries. We're #1 in cranberry production in the US, and in fact produce over 60% of the US cranberry crop here in Wisconsin, 40% of the US snap bean crop, which is first in production, third in potatoes and sweet corn, peas and carrots, representing our processing vegetable sector. In fact, we produce about a third of the US processing vegetable carrots here in the state of Wisconsin. We have about 64,000 farms, and luckily that number has stabilized a bit, although if there is a trend, of course, it's towards fewer farmers, as we'll talk about here in the context of outreach in a minute. As far as pests, it's always hard to put a pulse on a timely positioning of pest profiles, of course, but just a few examples here from each of our disciplines. On weeds, of course, we see the spread of Palmer amaranth, as you see on the right-hand picture. Water hemp, I would say, is spreading even more rapidly than Palmer amaranth at this point. And unfortunately, my colleague Rodrigo Worley in agronomy has tested many of these populations, and almost all of them are resistant to at least glyphosate, and more than likely to other sites and modes of action. So that leads to the context for our outreach programming of resistance management in general. As you see, also the corn earworm piece is a very important piece, as we rely heavily on pesticides, of course. So outside of resistance management, a couple of other examples to hit the second common theme, and that would be related to the variability that we've had in our climate, the weather that we see today. This is not insect killing day at 65 degrees in mid-December. And we see new pests moving in and surviving and overwintering that maybe we hadn't seen as frequently in the past. An example from my specialty crop world, the blunt-nosed leafhopper in cranberry, and that vectors a disease called false blossom that prevents the cranberries from producing berries. And while that had been more common in more southerly cranberry production, maybe towards the East Coast, New Jersey area, we now have it more commonly here in Wisconsin. Again, a signal that our climate is changing, and so is our pest spectrum. Similarly, we had a lot of tar spot in our corn, as I'm sure others did in the Midwest this fall, and other diseases that weren't as common, like blackleg in potato. In a bit of a broader context or concerns across the state, and probably the upper Midwest, #1, 2, and 3 are water, water, and water. Not only as it relates to quantity where we irrigate, but water quality, not only related to nitrates in groundwater, but now more frequent detections of some of the pesticides that we use in agriculture. Pest resistance, as I mentioned, is a great concern and has been for many years. There's no reason to rehash that too in depth. But as a specialty crop person, we're also concerned about the tools that are being used to overcome herbicide resistance in particular, and the potential for off-target movement of synthetic auxins, which cause damage and may end up on crops where tolerances aren't established. Variable weather, boy, today is just a great example of that, where we're starting out at 65 degrees. We have concerns about 55-mile-an-hour winds, tornadoes, and ending with thunder snow. And it's the middle of December. And this is in areas where we had 20 inches of snow last week. So how do we farm in such conditions? Not only do we worry about pest movement in that case, but also the effect of such variable weather on control, and particularly dilution not being the solution in heavy thunderstorms during our growing season. And now in particular, in the current conditions, for several years, we've worried about labor inputs in agriculture, particularly given that about 1% of the US population is involved in some sort of agrarian employment. But anecdotally, I hear more and more people asking about robotics and automation because particularly in our current labor climate, some of that monotonous, hard outdoor agricultural work is even less viable or attractive. So what can we do in terms of pest management to be as labor efficient as possible? And finally, how do we train a new generation of non-agricultural agriculturalists, as I call them? And I hear commonly from our input dealers, co-ops, and other places that the real challenge is that they're hiring business majors, marketing majors to sell pest inputs with very little biological or agricultural background. So how do we train that new generation of IPM practitioners? In terms of the context around hybrid access or hybrid programming that we'll talk about here in a minute, in Wisconsin, 67% of our farmers used a smartphone for farm business this year, and 22% of farmers are new to agriculture with 10 years or less of experience. Our state has made a conscious investment in broadband access in rural areas, and you can see that in the slide on the right, where we've had a nice increase, but still about 82% of our farm population has internet access. So that leads us into the ability to be able to do more hybrid programming. So how does the Wisconsin IPM program meet these needs? We tend to put our programming in two broad buckets for our EIP grant in particular. The foundational programs, these are what our clientele expect on a regular basis. Some of these have been offered since the program inception in 1979. And our clientele like going to the same places and knowing the expectations for the venue, the speakers, et cetera. And they're very well attended and sought after. Things like our IPM Scout schools that are offered on 3 UW system campuses, all the way down to our more traditional county commodity annual winter meetings, which we're now resuming in person. Today, though, I'd like to focus a little bit more on the right-hand side, again, trying to find common ground and the ability to work together to be efficient in this programming. And that would be in our emerging modernized programs, a focus on hands-on experiential learning as much as we can. And then also balancing that with the modernized digital online program delivery. And we have several examples of that I'll run through very quickly here before we get to some of our successes and challenges and opportunities moving forward. So in terms of the hands-on experiential learning and some of our more customized hands-on experiences, we've been doing these for many years. Dan Heider was originally involved in leading the Crop Diagnostic Training Center, and he did a great job of expanding it to other faculty and staff in our College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. And in this case, we've moved towards offering experiential training that's customized to the audience and to the current hot topics, such as off-target pesticide movement. And I use the picture on the left of the ornamentals to remind me of one that we did fairly recently with our Department of Agriculture pesticide investigators to show them what to expect in terms of herbicide movement in the home setting from an agricultural setting. So a very customized audience, but an ability for us to hit every county in the state with a multiplier event where we have only about 30 people there, but they each have context and context across our state. So that customized offering has been very successful, and we continue to offer that with this very hands-on experiential intense approach. Dan Heider also has developed and led the custom applicator program for several years. This is just an amazing program that's been very successful and highly sought after. It's offered each spring to give new custom applicators practice with the actual practical equipment that they'll be then driving in the field. So these are people new to the industry often, that are then cut loose on hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment in very high-risk situations. So the modules that are very practical and hands-on, as you see here, involve different types of equipment, different digital platforms and such, and a few days of very hands-on experience to be able to get to the field with some knowledge as they handle this expensive and risky equipment. Every year, Dan has more applicants to the program than available spots. It's limited so that it can maintain that intensity of practical hands-on experience. But every year, 100% of participants in the evaluation at the end would recommend the course to others every time we've asked that question. So it takes a great deal of time, a lot of collaboration, particularly to get this expensive brand new equipment on site, but just a great program that's appreciated by our clientele. We also have been very involved, Roger Schmidt, leading the development of smartphone applications. We have 10 apps so far in the IPM program, and they're published and maintained for free on the iOS and Google platforms. They've seen 140,000 lifetime downloads. The one on the top of the screen here is just a screenshot from the App Store of the new Tar Spotter app that Damon was involved in developing at a very timely time in 2021. We also have a new app along the way that's in beta testing right now for seed potato virus detection. So using our field research, the algorithms based on that to develop a user-friendly platform for agriculturalists to be able to use that research information. The Wisconsin IPM YouTube channel is also one where we look at that multiplier effect of being very efficient in reaching broad and diverse clientele audiences. We now have 10,800 subscribers. Roger and his group developed 55 new videos in 2021, very highly viewed. I think that piece at the bottom here, the bullet hits it. It's an equivalent in 2021 to an extension specialist delivering a 1-hour presentation to 40 people every day of the year. So it's a great efficiency to be able to get this information out there. And finally, one you'll see, this is on December 17th, on Friday. During the pandemic, we were able to develop a virtual brown bag series in response to not being able to meet in person. So we went from face-to-face to screen. And these were at a great timing where we could stay connected with our clientele, as you see is in a couple of the comments from the bottom here. I think the second one is maybe most important. We cut down on travel time, but it also offered that multiplier effect where people weren't able to bring their whole farm or dealership to a meeting, but they could sit there in front of a screen at lunchtime and be able to participate. So it expanded our audience greatly. And finally, right now we're developing what we call Back to Basics IPM certificate courses, online courses that aren't your traditional PowerPoint presentation. As you see on the bottom, we're blending a lot of different learning modules. This is really targeted towards that audience of new hires that don't come from agricultural or biological backgrounds, like the business school graduate that then is hired to sell pesticides. Well, how do pesticides work? What are the pests of concern, their biology, identification, management, et cetera. And developing a blend of learning modules to make that a more hands-on experiential opportunity. And that's based on some success that we had with our water stewards course that falls in the same range. So I'd like to spend, that's a quick overview of the programming. In the last few minutes here, I'd just like to spend a bit of time on what we've learned on the long-term prospects. Our farm demographics, like I think in many states, are strongly bimodal. 22% have farmed 10 years or less, but still the average age of our farmer is 58. So how do we meet that broad range of outreach needs that differ greatly right now? And then the outreach multiplier with online programming is higher than we anticipated. We on some of our cranberry brown bags, for example, we have about 130 growers and we'd have 600 participants from multiple states and up to 6 countries at a time. That's mostly good. Saves travel time. We can record them and post them, so there's the efficiency there. But we went from programming with a bounded audience that we knew and were comfortable with to something that's completely unknown geographically and otherwise. And that's made it easier than ever to include outside perspectives and expertise and invite others to present, which is great for our local audiences. But we also have concerns about references to pesticides, regional use patterns. Some folks have raised a concern that we're training the competition and giving them our edge. That is our business and extension to give away information, but we hear that concern. And we also have heard the concern that some businesses have operated in the ability to deliver some of these more traditional venues and programming, and they're losing their revenue streams as we give away this information. We've also learned a lot on that virtual road. Just closing up here, shorter is better. I can't emphasize that enough. We break our programs and materials, including even our blog articles, into shorter chunks like chapters in a book. We've heard from those out there in the clientele range that the long videos in particular can be a turnoff. If you read a newsletter article, you jump down to the paragraph that's pertinent to you and work on that. That's harder to do in a YouTube video. And we've learned to be very respectful of the growing season. I put an example on the right-hand side here. You can see in the preseason of April, 121 participants. We didn't record that first one, but as we get into the growing season, we get more people watching recorded views and in person. And we actually learned in 2021, take off the season during harvest and resume post-harvest in the fall. And the other piece that we've learned, there are a lot of really bad YouTube videos out there, including some that I've produced myself. Quality is still critical, takes planning. I'm not saying that everything needs a written script, but we need to plan out what we're going to do. Marketing, particularly if not utilizing the traditional partners to get the word out, we need a different way to do that. Quality moderation, as we have here on this great webinar, is extremely important, as well as the programmatic quality itself. We need to deliver high quality programming. We're also looking for ways that we can improve our program evaluation in this hybrid or online format. That's a little harder than handing out a piece of paper at the in-person grower meetings. And we find that that informal conversation is lost. So we're looking for ways to invite that feedback from our audiences. And audio and video quality has become better and more affordable. As you see in this picture here, this is Roger Schmidt from our program, and he's worked to arm our specialists with about a $250 package that we buy on Amazon with high quality lapel microphones that are great in the field in windy conditions, all the way through to making it work with our smartphones to be able to do this. So we just put it in the backpack and carry it in the growing season. We have it at any time. And it takes time and technical training that we don't have. A great example was the learning curve on closed captioning, even with programs like Otter AI, to make sure that they're compliant at an accuracy level was quite a hurdle in the beginning. We're getting better at it, but it still takes a lot of time. Our next challenge is finding ways to make virtual events more engaging and participatory, and I'm sure you've all had that experience also. We're trying to do this with grower panels mixed into our presentations. We use participant polls, whether it's through Zoom or Participole. Breakout rooms, although we found that they can be a distraction too. Less lecturing and more discussions. And we found that including the chat box more effectively when the crowds are larger can make it more engaging. And we've also found, I think as probably most people have, 2 moderators, one for the speakers and one for the audience, can make things go more smoothly. Nothing worse than a program that have a technology gap lose the momentum. So we're still learning, a lot to learn, but we're hoping that others in this group and beyond, maybe we find some common ground and some sort of efficiency where in this new world, we can develop programming that's as effective and maybe even more impactful than what we were doing in our traditional pre-pandemic type IPM outreach programming. So the pendulum swung hard. We're going to land somewhere in the middle. and we look at what we're going to offer in that context of what's still valued by our clientele, what's efficient to deliver, and how do we maintain that high impact. And that's where we plan on going here, realizing too that online burnout is very real for both the audience and the outreach personnel. So looking for that good middle ground. And at that point, that's where I'll leave it and ask if you've had any questions come from the group.
Yes, we have a couple. Could you share a list of what is in the video field kits?
Sure, I could share that list through the IPM group, or maybe even easier, I'll ask Roger to do it. He created an Amazon shopping list for us of what's in there. And some of it is related to being able to stabilize your phone for high quality videos that aren't jumping around with a handheld piece. To do that, a lot of it was related to the microphone and the adapters to be able to use both an Apple or a Google-based phone to be able to get professional quality audio. That was our biggest hurdle, to be honest, was getting the audio in the field in particular to be the highest quality. So with those adapters and the ability to tripod or stabilize the video quality was the biggest piece, but I could share the list with you. It was about a $250 package, and we just carry them in our backpacks in the summer now.
Be great. Another question was, when you have breakout rooms, do you have a moderator or discussion leader in each of those rooms?
Yeah, so we have very recent experience with this, with a research roundtable that we conducted, and the answer is yes. We have a moderator in each of those rooms that has a common list of questions and boundaries for the discussion, so to speak. And that is absolutely critical. Otherwise, we get in these kind of disparate free falls of conversation and tangents. So I think we've all found that having well-trained moderators that have a common goal for the discussion in each of the breakout rooms is absolutely critical.
Great, thank you. A couple more questions. So since you're talking about going to maybe more online type meetings, what do you see the future of maybe some of the traditional extension materials like printed bulletins or other pest management manuals?
I think that's an interesting piece, because obviously that's our more traditional bread and butter in extension is the printed pest management guides and such. I think as the ability to access the internet, especially through smartphones and such, we'll move more towards platform delivery electronically on all platforms, from your phone to tablet to desktop and such. And less print, certainly more print on demand, a PDF version that the user can then print the chapters that are relevant to them. But I don't, as in my former role as interim program leader in extension, associate dean for outreach, I don't see us having that big old warehouse down the road paying rent to hold hundreds of thousands of print publications. It's just inefficient, and it's easier to get the information out digitally. If people choose to print it, then that's great.
Kind of piggybacking on that, have you had any feedback on like internet quality? So if somebody did want to print something, but say, geez, my internet access is really slow, I can't print things, where do you see that going? That's
a great question. And we don't see it as much in the print piece. We've had people, indicate they've had to go to the town hall or library where they can get better internet access, maybe a printer. A lot of us don't have printers at home anymore to be able to do that. Where we've run into a bit of hurdles is where we've tried to do live remote broadcasts, even with our new kits. That doesn't change your access to the internet. So trying to do live broadcasts from the field, it sounds great till you get out there and it's jumping around or unable to connect. We do have one research station now where we're on the new satellite internet service, and it's been great. So as that continues to expand to get rural and global coverage, I really look forward to being able to do some of these distance broadcasts of some of our outreach programming. Great.
We have one more question that we have time for, and oops, just lost it. Hold on just a second. How do the videos or views on videos compare to the views on your blog posts?
how do the views on videos compare to our views on blog posts? I would say they're in a similar range. Our YouTube channel's well over 1 million views in total. It's really hard to generalize because we have some videos that may only have a couple hundred views. We have some that are in the hundreds of thousands. But I would say one piece, so one slide that I did skip in here, Damon Smith has been developing a bumper crop series where literally sitting on the tailgate or the bumper of a truck and interviewing farmers or other specialists. Those videos are intentionally very short, about 3 minutes or less, but very timely during the growing season. They get a huge number of views. And our audience seems to like these little, we're in the world of short communications. These are longer than a Twitter feed, but shorter than a full-time video and such. So those types of videos are getting tremendous numbers of views. So shorter really is better.
All right, great, thank you. Well, we are at the end of our time, so I want to thank you again, Jed, for the great presentation that you gave us. And I want to remind everybody that our next webinar will be on Wednesday, January 19th, and Franny Miller from Kansas State University was speaking on navigating the waters of IPM educational programming in Kansas. If you want to learn more about our North Central IPM Center program, you can go to our website, which is just ncipmc.org. I did put in the chat, if you want to view any of the previous webinars, you can find that on our webpage also. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope everybody has a great day and stay safe. Thank you.